Peace be upon you. We are in 19th century Europe. Specifically in Britain, attending a public auction. What goods does this merchant have on display? It's his wife. His wife? Yes. Some men used to sell their wives. Look up wife selling on any website such as History for documentation on this custom. Selling wives was cheaper than divorce and helped pay off the man's debts. Drawings of this phenomenon are found in Western history archives. The woman who annoys her husband with her nagging. By the way, the Arabic word is also nag. Received, as one of her possible punishments, the scold's bridle. An iron headpiece with a muzzle and a bit to compress the tongue. To prevent the woman from speaking for hours. You can watch this film about the scold's bridle. To see how a woman's annoying voice is described as barking. And how this bridle was used to punish the woman who gossiped or spread rumors. Women were subjected to various forms of injustice. Particularly women in lower social classes. Where could the woman seek refuge? She could have sought justice. And attained her rights by establishing truth and abolishing falsehood. But such values, truth and justice, require divine revelation. As a reference for both men and women. The Western woman looked into the altered texts of her religion. And found that a woman should learn in silence and full submission. That she wasn't permitted to teach or assume authority over a man. Why? Because she is Eve who was seduced and she trespassed. She seduced Adam, thus she is the origin of sin. She caused the misery of the human race. So God, according to the altered texts of her religion, punished her with pregnancy and delivery and made man her master. The Western woman read in the altered scripture that she was created for the man, but the man wasn't created for her. And that a man may sell his daughter. References for these texts are provided in the comments. Thus many Western women couldn't find justice in their altered religion. If the woman does not have a divine reference, which sets limits and outlines rights and responsibilities, in accordance with truth and justice, where can she find justice? It must be in the values that the West claims to adhere to, the values of freedom and equality. The woman must achieve freedom and gender equality. What if some forms of freedom and equality contradict truth and justice? Who is supposed to determine what is right and just? Religion. We told you that we see religion as an opponent, not a judge. And thus the Western women's liberation movement took off. With a human, not a divine, compass. Naturally, any deviation in one direction leads to another in the other direction. Thus feminism emerged alongside the women's liberation movement, which evolved into a movement to defy men with hostility and rivalry. A revenge for all historical injustices against women. The feminist slogans were launched: men are never trustworthy. Women must challenge men and compete with them in everything. A woman shouldn't sacrifice herself for anyone. No one is worth the sacrifice except you and your feminist sisters. No one should have control over you. You don't need anyone. Whether husband, brother, or children. Providing for yourself is the source of self-respect. If you let anyone provide for you, you lose your dignity and become enslaved. Therefore you must be financially independent. Here some rational voices were raised. If a woman's worth is measured by how much money she earns, then who will take care of the children? If the relationship between spouses is based on rivalry, who will lead the family? Whose opinion will prevail? This threatens the family structure. Children. Family. Let them all go to hell. You want to enslave women again using these glittering names. We told you, the only one worthy of my sacrifice is myself. My ambitions and the liberty of my sisters. I will not let anything stand in the way of my just demands. I am oppressed enough in justice. Thus began the stereotyping. of voices calling for the protection of the family unit and society, as attacks on women's liberty and attempts to return women to slavery and darkness. Victimhood was promoted among women and used as justification for every action. She has been badly abused, so what if she abuses a little to get equality and liberty? This appears in the statements of many feminist leaders, such as the American feminist Helen Sullinger, who said, "Male society has sold us the idea of marriage. Now we know it is the institution that has failed us and we must work to destroy it. Ending the marriage institution is a necessary condition for the liberation of women. Therefore it is important to encourage women to leave their husbands and not live with them. All history must be rewritten in light of the oppression of women." There are many similar statements from other feminist leaders. This angry oppressed woman, whose actions are all justified, became a prey for profiteering politicians, major capitalists, advocates of moral chaos, and others with private agendas, mostly men by the way, who rode the wave of feminism and women's liberation, as eventually admitted by the feminists themselves. As in this article by the feminist Nancy Fraser, for the British daily newspaper The Guardian, titled, "How Feminism Became Capitalism's Handmaiden, and How to Reclaim It." Gloria Steinem, one of America's most famous feminists, openly acknowledged, in a published interview, that she had received financial support from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, to support her activities. Some feminists had criticized her for misdirecting the path of the feminist movement, so she gave this interview to justify her actions. Steinem was a co-founder of Ms. Magazine, which promotes the idea of the defiant independent woman, Superwoman. She also served as director of the Independent Research Services Center. Notice how it's called independent despite receiving support from political sectors. What did politicians and capitalists in Europe and America gain from riding the wave of feminism and women's liberation? First, female employment. To achieve independence and prove herself means collecting taxes from half of society whose work at home was non-taxable. It also provides a labor force that is cheaper than men's labor. Discrimination in gender pay and promotion still exists to this day. Also, this woman who works in a mixed-gender environment will spend on cosmetics and engage in competitive consumerism, all of which serves capitalist materialism. Second, the divide and rule policy, reinforcing individualism and factionalism, where the state, or more accurately those who lobby and influence its policies, is the ultimate judge and referee, which weakens demands to curb the greed and domination of capitalists. In a world where the richest 1% own more than half of the world's wealth, according to an article in The Guardian. The book, The Mighty Wurlitzer, shows how politicians employ such methods to infiltrate groups, such as women and blacks. Third, rivalry between the mother and father, their preoccupation with their own affairs and neglect of parenting means the breakdown of the family and the loss of its central role in raising children according to the parents' values. Thus, the school and the state become the educator and policymakers can dictate whatever values they want to instill in these little hearts. The term nuclear family meltdown is a familiar one in the U.S. Politicians have benefited from feminist hostility towards the family entity. The feminist Mary Bain says, "In order to raise children with equality, we must take them away from families and communally raise them." Indeed, many families have been destroyed, and child homelessness in the U.S. has reached a historic high. It was published by Newsweek that in 2013, there were 2.5 million homeless children, some fleeing from broken homes, where the father and mother are both busy or act as hostile opponents. There is no care for the son or daughter, or they are mistreated. So she runs away. There is a special division in the U.S. Department of Justice for this phenomenon of runaway and homeless youth. Drug usage and mental illnesses are highly prevalent among these boys and girls who are without shelter, subjected to humiliation and sexual exploitation. Some prostituting themselves for shelter, and their numbers continue to rise. What about the woman who was used as a tool for politicians and capitalists to achieve all this? Did she really gain the rights and justice that she should have demanded? Did she, at least, achieve the freedom and equality she had hoped for? Let's see the results, using facts and statistics from top Western websites. I think that you will be shocked by what you will hear today. However, before we continue, some listeners are poised to say, yes, but Muslims have injustices against women too. Do you deny that our societies practice many forms of injustice against women? I say, how is your question related to our topic? What is the value of this comparison? Is my goal here to make a statistical comparison between our societies and theirs? Or is it to absolve men in our societies from any injustice against women? We are fully aware that our societies are filled with injustices against women and others, and that misery is deepening for both men and women. But we are discussing this topic to remove this injustice and eliminate the misery and hardship Western countries and international organizations and agencies offer their services to help the Muslim woman in their own special way. Moreover, feminist ideas have strongly cast their shadows over Muslim societies. Thus today's topic is to present the story of the Western woman, to see if those who offer us their services have truly solved their own women's problems. Have they achieved justice for her? Have they even provided her with freedom and equality? Do they really want good for the Muslim woman? This path that they want the Muslim woman to put her footstep on, where does it lead? Let us continue our story without interruption and without the constant reminders of. I would like to emphasize that this injustice in our countries is not representative of Islam. Do not think that I am against women's work in all its forms. Please do not misunderstand me about such and such. Let us not rush to the defensive state that Islam haters always put us in. Let us cooperate, as Muslim brothers and sisters, to diagnose the problem and distinguish real solutions from fake ones which only increase our misery and hardship. So back to the Western woman. Let's accompany her from one station to the next. That homeless girl on the street, or the one in her family home who is independent and wants to provide for herself, or doesn't have enough money to finish her degree. What is the solution? There is a phenomenon in the countries of freedom, which we will refrain from naming, whereby this girl, who needs money, sells her body to an older man, her father's age, who uses her sexually in return for money and parades her around as arm candy. So she works part-time in prostitution and continues to attend university as a student. Hear this interview with a client who bought the honor of 6 young women. With his money, listen to his views on women. So this customer says that enjoying a number of girls this way is cheaper than marriage. That entering a place with a beautiful girl is like pulling up in a beautiful car. This is the value of a woman to him. There are several websites which deliver this type of service, with detailed statistics on a girl's expected income from selling her honor, as well as the age and profession of her male clients, a large proportion of which are executives and businessmen working for major companies. By the way, you may have felt disgust while hearing this person talk about women as a sexual commodity, a piece of furniture, a thing, not a human But what if I told you that treating women as an object or a commodity has become the norm in the West? In published research, a number of Americans were asked about the trait that they value most in men and women. Honesty and morality were the highest valued traits in men, while in women, the most important trait that Americans valued was physical attractiveness. So the value of a woman is dependent on her physical attractiveness. This leads to the important phenomenon called the sexual objectification of women, i.e., treating a woman as an object to use, a sexual commodity, not a human being valued for her beliefs, morals, and honesty, or even for her intelligence and skills. This study on the subject is referenced hundreds of times. There are dozens of published research papers on the sexual objectification of women. These studies, by the way, do not refer to the objectification of women as an insidious inhumane phenomenon which must be fought, but as a phenomenon to be studied by analyzing its psychological effects objectively. These studies show that most women see themselves as sexual objects for men, and that the media is ingraining this view, as well as society, and even video games. Women's bodies are displayed for marketing purposes, as decorations. This leads some women to pay excessive attention to their appearance, and spend long hours in front of the mirror. It also leads to psychological illness for some women who feel ashamed of their bodies, body shame. Shame because she is treated like a sexual object which she despises, or shame because she is unattractive in a society that values her based on her attractiveness. The research also mentions that some women experience mental illnesses. As a result, they compare themselves to the typical advertised woman and undergo plastic surgery or use cosmetic tools to change their hair, skin, or eye color. You can now imagine this freak girl who wants to prove herself, viewed by society as a sexual commodity and valued based on her physical attractiveness. You can imagine what she will face on the street, in public transportation, at the university, in the work environment, even when she's online at home. The European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights issued a report in 2014 with an expressive title, Violence Against Women, Every Day and Everywhere. The report also addressed the sexual violence women experience in childhood. Let's take a look at public transportation. The UN published a news article 2 years ago, titled, "Overwhelming majority of women experience some form of harassment or sexual violence in their daily journeys."